Many years ago, in a different world at a time of great peril, a baby boy was born who would go on to change the course of human history. But from his very first breath, his life was in grave danger, and to save him from certain death, he was set in a protective chest and sent into the unknown. The baby would later be raised by a childless savior that found him and gave him shelter and love and affection. And nurtured by that affection, fostered by that attention, enveloped in that love, that baby would grow to discover his power to protest evil and protect people in pain. And in time, he would himself become a savior, and his name was Kal-El, also known as Superman. And if that description of his origin sounded awfully similar to the story of Moses, many have seen that as entirely uncoincidental. Though the inventors of the comic character themselves, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, both first-generation North American Jews, have denied any biblical influence. Simcha Weinstein in his book Up, Up and Oy Vey, and Roy Schwartz in his book Is Superman Circumcised, beg to differ and see a deep Mosaic resonance in the Superman story. But there is at least one way in which the Superman story and the life of Moses diverge. Just a single day after he first saves a slave, Moshe's identity is out. Even though he was confident that he was alone, even though he went to great efforts to hide what he had done, everyone knew who had killed the Egyptian. But Superman, despite being a profoundly public persona with his image disseminated across the planet daily, he managed to keep his cover intact and his identity secret. How? It would seem by simply wearing a set of spectacles and introducing himself as Clark Kent. But so extraordinarily inconceivable does it seem for a highly prominent, public and conspicuous superhero to hide his face behind a simple frame that the writers of the comic strip revealed in an issue published in December of 1978 that actually Superman focuses a hypno beam through his kryptonite lens glasses at everyone that he meets, mesmerizing them to see him as a meek, frail, and not terribly handsome version of himself. Of course, they contended everyone would see through a simple disguise, and in addition to his heroic ventures, Clark Kent exerts a huge amount of energy in maintaining his cover. And this leads us to a dramatic moment that we read in shul this morning in the life of another of our heroes, not Moses, but Joseph. For the first time since they sold him at 17, Joseph's brothers stand before him, but much has changed. Famine has swept across the ancient Near East, and Joseph has peaked in power in Egypt. And as they stand, or in fact kneel before him, the text tells us something astonishing. V'yaker Yosef et achav. Joseph recognized his brothers, v'heim lo hikiruhu, but they did not recognize him. And of course, this is our question. How could they not recognize their younger brother? They had grown up with him, become fed up with him. They had spent every waking day with him. How could they not see that it was him? They had listened to his dreams of stars and sheaves. At 17, they had sold him to a caravan of thieves. Their behavior had left their father submerged in grief. How could they not now identify their brother? And there are two answers to this question that I'd like to share with you today, starting in Spain with Nachmanides. And for him, the reason that the brothers didn't recognize Joseph is simple. He put on a disguise, a real disguise. In the words of Nachmanides, miyad shara'a otam. Immediately when Joseph saw them, Hakiram, he recognized them. Ufachad ulaya keru, and he was terrified that they would recognize him too. V'yitnaker aleihem, so he disguised himself. Shesam hamitznefet al mitzecho, he put his crown, the nemes, over his forehead, uksata panim, and covered his face partially, v'shana atzmo, and he changed himself in his presentation. So for Nachmanides, of course the brothers would have recognized Yosef, and Yosef knew that himself. So he underwent a Mrs. Doubtfire-style makeover to keep them in the dark and keep his identity hidden. We have to imagine for Nachmanides, Yosef altering his accent, shifting his tone, speaking Egyptian, and wearing heavy clothes. We have to see him in this scene as camouflaged in the extreme. But there is another reading as to the reason that the viceroy's identity remained secret. In a view cited by almost every commentator, our sages say that there was only one thing that stopped the brothers from recognizing Yosef: his beard. In their words, Yatzar b'lo chatimat zaken, when he left them, he didn't have a zakan, a beard, uva b'chatimat zakan, but now that they are here, he was standing there with a beard. So for the sages, the only reason that Yosef's siblings couldn't tell that it was him was due to a layer of facial hair. And it seems to me that this reading is so much weaker, resembling the ostensible disguise of Superman that fans found so unconvincing. A set of glasses. For the sages, it seems that Safnat Paneach, Yosef's new name, is the ancient Egyptian equivalent to the Metropolitan Clark Kent, where Superman needs only to wear glasses and Yosef needs only to grow a beard to hide their true identity. But it so happens that 4 years ago, researchers at the University of York conducted an experiment that would have saved Superman's inventors from devising kryptonite hypnosis and saves us from missing the profundity of the sages' reading of this scene. The study, which was published in Applied Cognitive Psychology, was led by Dr. Robin Kramer, who concluded that simply wearing glasses can stop strangers from recognizing your face. It is true, they concluded, that a deep familiarity allows the mind to transcend minor changes on faces, but if a stranger is presented with two images of the very same face, one with glasses and the other without, the ability to match them drops precipitously. And though the research was conducted with the hopes of shaping passport policy to help border agents match strangers' faces to their photographs, the authors do suggest that on the basis of their results, the residents of Metropolis could well have been deceived by Clark Kent's spectacles without the need for hypnosis. And perhaps this teaches us something about what our sages saw in our scene as well. Perhaps Yosef knew that his beard was a pretty thin disguise, that a mere layer of facial hair wouldn't hide his identity from anyone who really knew him. And perhaps what Yosef was doing was trying to see how the brothers had seen him and his dreams. Perhaps he was assessing whether they had believed him and sold him in jealousy, or thought him insane and sold him in exasperation. V'yaker Yosef et Echav, he immediately recognized them, despite the fact that they had no doubt all changed as well. Some had beards and some did not, but Yosef saw them, Echav, as his brothers, and he recognized them. V'hem lo hakiruhu, but they did not recognize him. And this is the moment that Yosef knew that they had never really known him. He now knew that when he shared his visions of power, they saw an adolescent shepherd and treated his dreams as fantasies. All they saw was a teenage boy suffering from delusions of grandeur with no hope of defying their expectations. They saw who he was on the surface, but they missed the talents and the passions and the convictions that stirred his soul. They saw his face, but they failed to see the force of his faith. He was the Baal HaChalamot, the dreamer, because he saw deeply, he pierced through appearances. But his brothers were evidently imprisoned by the present, confined by their tame imaginations, trapped by the visual vistas that curbed their enthusiasm. A mere layer of facial hair was enough to dispel their familiarity with their brother. They had never seen him deeply and could not pierce through the beard to peer at the soul behind the face before them. And perhaps that is why it is only now, not when the brothers kneel, but when it becomes clear that they don't recognize him, that we are told that Yosef remembers his dreams. V'yizkor Yosef et chalamot. He remembered his dreams. He is not reminded of his visions by the sight of his brother's submission. He is reminded of his ability to see past the present by his brother's evident blindness. And in many ways, the holiday of Hanukkah is a celebration precisely of seeing deeply, of seeing beneath the surface. It is a time where we recognize that appearances can be deceiving, that a great army can be felled by a small band of devoted warriors, that a single tiny flame can dispel an overwhelming darkness. For 8 days, we celebrate the truth that Yosef knew and his brothers learned, that beneath every surface of every face lies a soul filled with faith and power, and if we see deeply enough, we can fuel them. So on this Rosh Chodesh, let us all renew our commitment to seeing each other and ourselves deeply, and in so doing, allowing all our dreams to come to be. I wish you a Shavua Tov, a Chodesh Tov, and a Chanukah Sameach.